Hey everyone, it's David, founder of Stately AI, creator of XState, and Farzad, senior engineer at Stately. And we decided that we're going to do a small stream just to demonstrate how we would use a Stately editor for something other than the code implementation, but actually communicating how we would design a feature. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll see how this looks. So basically, we were talking this morning, and we decided that we need to. Well, we've been talking about this for a while, but we need to get to this redesign of the actions panel over here. So a couple of current issues with it, or not issues as in bugs, but issues as in just things that feel a little bit off, is that when you create an action like some action over here, and let's say you create another action when you edit an action, currently you can't really delete or edit another one, and that seems like a weird restriction. You should be able to just edit whichever action you want at any time. And also, we are introducing the behavior that we can add arbitrary actions as well, and these actions might have more than just a type. So, for example, if we wanted to send an email, then that action might have a body, body, subject, to field, CC field, just all of these other fields that would be part of the action. And this is going to be more important when we introduce built-in actions. So Farzad has recently built the assign actions editor, which does include like a few other fields, but we're going to have more built-in actions that does include more fields. So
Yeah, probably worth mentioning that in XState V5, if I remember correctly, this is named parameterized actions.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it is something that is available in V4 as well, where you could just
Hmm.
add different parameters to actions, but you do it directly on the object. Um, and yeah, so it's actually going to be a lot of fun because we are going to be creating integrations with different things. So that's going to be super easy to create actions or invocations or spawned actors for basically anything that you could think of. But yeah, so let's talk about how we would basically redesign this actions part in terms of a state chart. So instead of basically talking about it back and forth, we could just do it here in the editor. So
Mhm.
go ahead and start.
And it goes pretty well with how we've been preaching about the fact that user state charts can act as a common language in the team. So imagine this is a feature design session where other types of stakeholders like a project manager, product owner, designers, and such can also participate, and all could brainstorm a single feature without before any designer or developer implements anything.
Right. Yeah. So again, pretend that both Farzad and I are, stakeholders, project managers, just people in charge of defining the spec of what is this feature, this action editor feature going to be like. And let's talk through it even without thinking about finite states or anything like that. Let's just talk about it in terms of what the user can do. So I'm going to call this action editor. And we could ignore first state for now, but um, let's see. I'm thinking, and I'm going to add a self transition. You could do the same just by dragging here and going there, but we could just right click and click add self transition here. So let's see. A user can add an action. But this isn't really specific enough. We want to have the user able to like specify an action type. So enter action type. And so this could be, anything from a built-in action to a custom action or anything like that. What else could the user do? Obviously, when
Uh, yeah, we
they
could
enter
add
an
like
action type. Sorry.
yeah, in addition to the type of the action, you could also add any arbitrary property.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah. So I'm gonna put here um,
That's a
add
great way to get us
action.
started with thinking about flows or scenarios or machines, whatever you want to call it, is to think about events first. What is possible?
Mm-hmm.
List them
So
together and then structure them into different regions that we call states.
exactly. But yeah, the first things first, we could talk about the events. We have enter action type, add action property. Oh, we could also delete an action, of course. So, you could just imagine we have a bunch of actions here. So I'm going to add a self transition, and this is just going to be delete action. Trying to think of what else. Oh, a user could reorder an action. So they could move one before the other. And this is especially important when you're actually simulating and just working through the logic of your state chart, where you might want actions to happen in a specific order. So reorder action over here.
So how does it look like in terms of interactions? Do we want to consider it as something like you move one of the actions up and down, or you resort the entire list of actions?
That's interesting. Interesting to think about. I was thinking about it more like a let's say that you have a list of actions over here. You could drag and drop to reorder them.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Then one event is sufficient.
Mm-hmm. Oh, something else. So in the action, so we have enter action type, and assumedly that you would press enter or something to actually commit that, and then it would show that form. Again, that's getting into finite states, which we'll talk about later. But you could cancel adding an action. So
it's not just adding an action. You could cancel. What's the general term for both adding and editing?
Absurd.
Modifying. I don't know.
Yeah.
Absurd something, because we want these to be both, like, to exist for both addition and updates.
Okay, so yeah, we'll put this as cancel editing an action. So you could enter the action type, you could cancel. Well, let's make these separate for now, because that could be a refinement process in the future. So we could cancel creating an action. We could also cancel editing an action.
We want to submit an added action, like basically add an action.
Yeah. So, So there's a lot of things to think about. So, I'm going to call this commit in action. And of course, like just talking about the view, we could expand action and we could collapse action.
Yeah, so Eric is saying maybe drag action from one event to another. That's actually what we have with the reorder action.
So it would be a little bit different than reordering, because we're physically moving that action from one state or one event to another, which would be really interesting. But that's a little bit outside the scope, just putting my project manager hat, outside the scope of what we're doing here. We're just focusing on basically this little form right over here. Okay, so just this simple form, we have a bunch of stuff. And so even this alone can be, just a starting point of like, hey, here's all the things that we need to support in our action editor feature. But a lot of these things don't really make sense, in isolation. For example, you can't really cancel editing an action if you're not editing an action. Like, that doesn't make sense. You can't delete an action that doesn't exist yet. You have to create the action first, etc. So let's actually get into finite states. So what do we think?
Yeah, let's structure them.
Okay, so right now, the way that you would add an action over here, you have this form where you enter the type of the action, and we do want to keep that. So again, this is going to be some action. You have your events here, cancel and save, and let me go ahead and zoom in so that you can see that. Cancel and save, and then you press save, and then you could delete from here. So this is another state, and this is how project managers should be thinking as well, is that, okay, there's multiple different screens that you might have, and these represent different states. So in this state, you could actually delete an action because it exists, and you can edit it. And so I feel like this screen should actually be different than the what I would call the select an action screen, because now you might have different properties of the action. So for example, if you have an assign action, which, by the way, check out Farzad's demo in previous office hours where he gave a demo of the really cool action editor. You will see different fields rather than just the action type. And I also think that in this edit action field, you shouldn't be able to edit the type because in that case, you just want to create a new action if you're really changing the type. I don't know. That's something we could talk about.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. But
yeah. And these are good discussions to have, and it's better to have these when you have an actual diagram in front of you. But just imagine that this edit screen looks a little bit different where you have additional fields, but you could do the same thing. You could cancel save. And so here's something that I really wish was here. When you're editing, there's no reason that you can't delete, but there's no delete button anywhere here. And there's also no reason why you can't add another action. It's definitely, I mean, it's a little chaotic, but it's definitely possible for you to have multiple action forms open at the same time.
Now that we think about deleting, I think we need an interaction like duplicating or copying an event. In case you don't want to edit the type of the event that you already created, should be easy to just copy an event, like an existing event. Sorry, I mean action.
Right. And actually, yeah, this is a good point. So I could add a self transition that just says duplicate.
Yeah, duplicate is good.
Yeah. And yeah, if you want many actions to do the same thing, then yeah. Or yeah, if you want many similar actions. Is my screen zoomed in? I'm missing the panels are over here. Yeah. It was some double zooming weirdness, not because of the editor, just because I forgot that I zoomed in. Okay, so let's get to our states. We have the first state of, and this is just specifically for the action editor part over here. When we first decide to, all right, so let's just call this idle. That's sort of my defaults for whenever I don't know what the state should be. And let's make another state. So this state is going to be select action. So this is a state where a user presumably can select which action they want to add. In this state, you don't have to add all the fields yet because you're just in that selecting phase.
Wait. What does it mean when you say select an action to add? Because
so when you select an action to add, it's just you're typing in which action you want to do. And then once you've selected the action, now you go to this edit action screen where it might show different fields of that action.
Oh, okay, wait. So you're trying to merge the edit action view for both adding an action and editing an existing action. Are you trying to do that, or are we just building a CRUD form here?
Wait. Sorry, repeat that.
Because when you say select an action to add, that means what am I selecting if I'm just adding it? There is no action in the first place to be selected. I'm adding this new one.
So idle, you could just imagine as this.
You're talking about the list here.
Yeah.
The list is idle, so it's like, okay. Yeah, all right.
Mm-hmm. And so this discussion, this is why it's really good to just have a description and sort of talk about in this idle state, it's just the action list with a plus button, something like that.
Actually, basically there is no interaction happening yet, and it's just listening for some new interactions.
Exactly. Yeah. So when we add an action, now we're taken to the select action screen. And so this is where a user can start typing to select an action. So for example, they could type assign, they could type email, and then they could just pick from a list. And then
right. Okay, now I understand what you mean.
A user can edit the properties of an existing action.
So you're basically imagining a type ahead suggestion, select box component, whatever its name is, and then you choose a template for that action type. let's say if you're choosing like assignment action, that it will give you like a form for adding as many properties as you want, or like an inline action, like a normal inline action, you can have like you would get like an input to write your expression or the type of the event. So when we say select here, we mean select from a base of templates, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. So just talking
we
about
don't even talk in the same English, so it's really crucial to have a diagram in place.
Yeah. So you can see we basically have our two main building blocks and we just have to put it together. So first we have the events. And so this is everything that can happen. And I just put add here, but you can imagine that it was outside and we moved it in. And we're going to be doing that to some events too. And we also have our different states. And so these states can really map directly to screens. Like if we're talking to a designer, we could say, okay, we have a select action screen and we have an edit action screen. Actually, I'll give just an example over here. Pipe Dream, which is a really cool tool. You see that there's this little plus over here. So if I click plus, we have this screen where you would select an action, but obviously there are no fields, except for this one, of course, where you could actually type the different properties of an action because it doesn't know what the actions are yet. So if I click send email, now there's this configure field, and then you have these different fields. And of course, you have different actions. You could rename, delete the step. You could expand and collapse it.
So the reason that I was confused by that naming is the point that Eric is making, because select and edit sound like events, not the states. Yeah, action selected or being selected because you haven't still selected something. Kind of like a intermediate view that you're supposed to select from a set of templates, something like that.
Okay. Actually, that's a good call out, Eric. So I renamed them. We have action selected. We have action editing or editing action. You could just type these however you want. And actually something, a little note about why I really appreciate the editor is that when you're designing this, if you're like, you know what, I really don't like the name of this, and I could, change it. For example, Eric said, I like it better if we call it selecting action. Then I don't need to change this where all of my events and other states and whatever are defined, because it's just going to automatically do that for us when we actually export it to code. So
now this is nice because selecting actions is just an intermediate view for like adding a new action scenario. Whereas if you were editing an existing action, you would directly go from idle to editing action. So it's like,
yes.
Am I getting it right?
Yeah. So in fact,
okay.
In fact, let's do we're basically doing the refinement process over here where we know everything a user could do, or basically everything that could happen. These don't necessarily need to be just user events. And we know all of the quote unquote screens or states that we have here. We have idle, selecting, editing. And so you said, if we have an existing action, then we should be able to edit it. I don't see that event over here. Which means
because we need an event we need an event named select action. So that selection can be either from selecting action view or from an existing action. We need like a select action. So something that keeps the ID of the selected action in context or something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, or edit action, basically.
Yep. That. So let's call this add action. We'll call this edit action. And so once we've selected an action, which I think we have over here. Oh yeah, so that's enter action type, which is basically the same as, select action. Let's go ahead and move this.
Okay, so if you've chosen a type of action for committing, that means you can't change the type of it's not a type, like an input of type text that you can edit. It's like an option you're choosing from select box.
Exactly. Or it could be
that's why you meant we can't edit it later.
Exactly. Because and then it could be an autocomplete, just because things get really complicated when you're editing an action and you're like, I want to completely change the action type, because then the questions become, what do you do with the existing fields that you already filled out? Do some of those merge over? Do you just completely wipe them away? that's why it's not really a common user pattern. And the more common one is you probably just want to create a new action instead of changing the type of your existing action. So yeah. All right, so let's move a few events over. And I really wish, and I promise this is coming in the future, but I wish that Farzad was here too and we were editing the same state chart. But for those of you joining, again, we are modeling an updates to our action editor. So, okay. We have
sort of like a recursive feature design.
Yeah,
Designing
exactly.
a feature for the same product, we are using toModel.
Mm-hmm. So let's see. Add action property can be a self transition because this is something that we're doing while we're editing an action. Delete an action. We could actually do in the idle states. That could really be done at any time. And so because all right, when you're selecting an action, the action isn't really created yet, so you can't really delete an action in that state. Yeah, I guess you could also do it when you're editing the action, but actually, yeah, let's move that there. I wonder if this works if I copy paste.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, well, so what I did was I selected this state and I was hoping that it would magically just paste that event over to that state, but we could, I think that'd be a cool feature. We could do that later. Yeah. Let's see, reordering an action can also be done. Let's just put in editing action. So I'm just going to drag this over here.
Yeah. All right, I have a little challenge for you.
Okay.
What does deleting action mean? What does delete action event mean? And how is it different from cancel adding an action? Because like when you're adding a new action, you're kind of like editing a temporary action, right? So if you delete that action, it's exactly as if you canceled the adding part. So they're like a duplicate event names there. Does it make sense to you?
Sort of, yeah. So you're assuming that selecting an action, like when we get to that screen, that it creates a temporary temporary action, right?
Yeah, that's what we have with our model because we only have one single editing action. And
yeah, so I think that we shouldn't do that. I think that when you go from idle to selecting action, then it doesn't create a temporary action. It just shows the form. Like in this selecting action state, you're just seeing a form. No action is created yet because you haven't selected an action yet. And so that's actually a good place to introduce when we select an action. We actually add that action. So, or whatever that means. Creates the action. Just come to create action over here. So
I would name it a little better. Add action to list of actions or something to just distinguish between the naming of events and actions.
Yeah, so add action to actions.
Yeah, kind of like be verbose about its nature of being an effect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So whether you're communicating with project managers, designers, or developers, we could see that, okay, when a user selects an action, we need to add that action to the action. So it's not created yet until we actually do this action. And that's hopefully visually clear to see.
Okay, now I think we need to refine so that select action. Sorry. No, wait. Okay, so you're in idle.
Mm-hmm.
In the selecting action, you're seeing that. Can you show me the other website you were showing? What was that, Pipe Dream or something?
Yeah, Pipe Dream.
Piped. Yeah, okay. So this is now selecting action state.
Right
this
here.
Is idle,
yes.
And now this is selecting action. Okay. So you choose the template of the action you want to create. Let's choose one of them. Great, just one of them. Yeah, okay. So this is now still selecting action.
So the action actually exists at this point. It's like we could get out of it. It's there. So at this point, it exists.
Okay.
It might be incomplete. Like there might be some invalid fields, which is fine, but it exists.
All right, great. So this would be editing action. Okay, now makes sense.
Yeah.
Get back.
All right. So, and also you could, if you want to take a screenshot of something, you could take a screenshot. We don't have drag and drop yet, but if your screenshot lives somewhere, then you could just add it to the to the markdown.
I think a
Actually,
very cool feature to work on would be to allow pasting an image, like a blob image, into the description.
oh
So
yeah,
you just take a screenshot and paste very fast.
yeah, that'd be awesome. Let me try something real quick. So I just use CleanShot X, which is really awesome. So just like Farzad was talking about, ideally in the future we could have a way to just drag and drop. That would be amazing. But what we do have is the ability to just add Markdown. So I'm just going to add a screenshot of pipe dream here. And
Wow,
it's
CleanShot uploads this for you automatically? That's
yeah,
amazing.
it does, but it's not working.
Yeah, my workflow has been to open a GitHub
This is weird.
comment on a PR or something, let GitHub upload that to their cloud, and then use their source.
That's not working. I thought that would work. Oh well. So maybe it's a glitch.
That's supposed to work.
Yeah. Interesting. But you could do any sort of markdown here. Oops. No, just a little feature if you're not aware. And you could add images. I'm just not sure why it's working. Okay, so we do have a quick question over here. If there are many pop-up modes or different functions, should there be many states or just one? And so that really depends. Are they mutually exclusive or are they part of the same entity? So for example, in our actions, you could have many actions over here, like n number of actions from 0 to, well, infinity, really. Don't try to add infinite actions. The editor will probably crash. But each one of those can be represented by this single state chart. So a state chart shouldn't try to represent a lot of entities. It should represent the behavior of one entity, if that makes sense. I think that's a question you're asking.
And again, like you can use multiple states when you're trying to, because like what we mean by behavior is what events are possible in what states. So if you want something to not be not be allowed in a certain view or something, that needs to be a state.
Yeah. Also, Programbo asks, just came in, are you talking about aborting an edit? And yeah, that's one of the potential actions that we're talking about. So when editing an action, actually, I quickly just saw, and I noticed the direction of the arrows. There's nothing really pointing from editing action to idle. So you're right. That really tells me that we're missing this cancel editing in action, which I'm going to add right now. Let's move this over. There we go. So now we could abort or cancel editing in action. And yeah, we could just visually express that feature right there. So
I think what we need instead of canceling is just deleting, because when you get to editing action, at that point, you already have this action available in your list.
So here's the thing. With canceling editing in action, what this really means is that
just close the form. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, just close the form and revert it to. And so again, Farzad and I talking, these things can all be captured within here. So I could say cancel editing in action. So we're going to reset action to previous values.
Yeah. And delete is only currently possible in idle. I guess this should be available in the root of the machine, so we can delete everywhere.
Yeah, that's
true. Or maybe
true.
just no, maybe not in selecting action.
Yeah, so non-selecting action, and that's why I have it here.
Oh,
and it's actually,
didn't see the duplicate. Sorry.
Yeah, that's why we need to color code them or something.
Yeah.
We could add like a little...
it would be nice to just give them like a splash of red or something. That would be just nice. Yeah, something like that. These are destructive events. That's good. That's good.
Yeah. And then I
You're
can
fast.
do that here too. Yeah. All right. So we could delete an action. We could reorder an action, commit an action. So this really has to do with editing an action, because we're editing and we need some sort of way to commit it. And by the way, this doesn't have to be like an explicit, like a button or something. Committing an action could very well be just when you blur from the field or something like that. Or I guess you would have to click save. So yeah. because we do have those two things. We have cancel and save. Yeah. Just looking at the comments here, time and time again, I found that state charts end up working best when you really give them one or a few things to do, and they do it well. Yeah. So think of a state chart as a human being, just like me or Farzad. If you give us too much work, we're going to get really confused and we're going to really burn out. And so that's why it's important that we focus on one task at a time. And so that's a good mental model for thinking about state charts as well, where a state chart should do one thing or like control the behavior of one entity, and it should do it well. And so the, just complex behaviors of many entities talking to each other, that's done by state chart communication, or that gets more into the actor model.
Exactly, because you want an actor to have only its own behavior, not to have overlapping behavior with other actor.
Right. Yeah. These are all view properties, collapsing in action, expanding in action. And so what I'm thinking of over here, and man, when I say what I'm thinking of, I really should write it down. So when we expand an action, this doesn't mean we're going to the editing action state. This just means, and I'll add a description over here so you could see that we show all the properties of the action. That's what I mean by that. We also have duplicate action. So where should that live? I guess, so it doesn't make sense for it to be in editing or selecting, right? Because we want to move, like just basically copy paste that action. Is that what you mean by that feature?
But I can see some benefits in having that available in all the states. Say you're creating an action and immediately you think of something very similar and you want to just prototype that at the same time.
So. Well, but in that case, like I could just, I would first want to, select that action and then be able to duplicate it.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. Because before choosing, it doesn't make sense to duplicate because nothing exists. That makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like deleting an action. You want it to be available in both idle and editing action.
Mm-hmm.
But the editor doesn't support that yet, like the forbidden events or forbidden transitions. But like later on, it will be just easier to add this to the root state, so it's available to all the children, and just override it to do nothing in selecting action.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I don't think that you could do that. Like
no,
we have
not really.
Event after always wildcard events. I don't think you could see the drop down over here, but
no, we can.
Yeah,
I mean, you could right click on this and expand the submenu for type of the event type.
So there's no way to have this be quote unquote a forbidden event. That's a good mental note. We should add that. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's a very quick win. So
I'm gonna change this to edit action property. We could reorder an action, delete an action, collapse and expand. We could duplicate an action.
So here's the thought. Why do we have reorder action in editing action? Shouldn't that be in idle?
Yes, you're right. You're right. So actually, this is really good because, if you bring a developer into this, even just a designer, they would be able to say, hey, no, it doesn't make sense for you to drag and drop an action while, you're editing it. So that makes sense. So reorder is part of the idle events that could happen. All right.
This looks complex enough.
Yeah. I mean, it's what I call, or not what I call, but what others call essential complexity, because all we're expressing over here are the things that a user could do and the different screens that we have. So a user could do all of these different things, and none of these are just incidental complexity. All of these are things that we described as features for users to do. And these are just the 3 different screens that we talked about. So whether you have this in linear or Jira as a list of things, or you have it in a diagram as a state chart, it's still going to be the same amount of essential complexity. So,
it's just a matter of being explicit or implicit.
Right. And also a matter of being able to simulate. So you could actually talk through, okay, we're in the idle state. There's a bunch of things we could, do. But if I'm talking about this with you or with anyone else, I could say, hey, from the idle state, a user could decide to add an action. From there, they're taken to the selecting action screen where you could do two things. You could cancel, or you could, select an action. And then now you're taken to the editing action screen. So from here, you could do a few things. We might edit some action properties, delete an action, which, I'm going to see if you could find this. There's a bug here, or a bug in our logic. What do you think it is?
Well, when you delete the action, you should go to idle because that action no longer exists.
Exactly. So, we have a flaw in our logic, which Farzad pointed out. So now we could just do
I
this.
actually got it from reading the description.
Oh, yeah. Okay, cool. So this is great. We found a bug. So we could add an action, select an action, edit the properties. And now when we delete an action, we go back to idle. So that makes sense. And so as a developer, let's say that, this is good for an MVP. We want this to be the behavior of our action form. But later, Farzad's like, hey, a lot of people are accidentally deleting actions. Then in the future, we could be like, okay, let's go ahead and add a feature. So instead of just deleting action, we have this deletion modal,
yeah,
right? And then we could just redirect this to the deletion modal, and then we could say, confirm delete, or we could cancel. And so guess what? That took me 15 seconds. And if we were exporting this in code, all we have to do is just map this to a modal, these to buttons, and we're done. Like, that's our logic. And then in the future, if Farzad says, you know what, I don't like modals, let's just have the user live with their consequences of deleting the action, then we could say, okay, let's move this here and delete these three things. And there we go. Our logic is updated. So, yeah. Let's get to questions. John says, I started off using notes in the visit, but everything gets cluttered real quick. Have you considered taking an approach like multiple pages? Click into a note to see detailed info and keep main clean. Yes, we did have a meeting. All of my notes are on Excalibur somewhere for this, but we had the idea of different views. And so each view would allow you to essentially drill into like a specific state. And this is what we call focus mode. It's something that we are planning for the future, where in focus mode, you would only see the current state, the incoming and outgoing transitions for that state, actions, etc. But you would have just a narrow view of just that one state so that you could focus on it. And so I think that that's, something that you would want. It's not actually just zooming into the chart, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think actually John's feedback got me thinking that, but sometimes if you have like a long description, it definitely clutters the diagram. So it's like a unnecessary scale of the diagram where the logic is still inbound and small, but it's just scaling in the size because of descriptions. So what about like a compromise here? And maybe like, have you seen mind map softwares, David, where you can link or refer to other things?
Yeah.
What if we had like a note-taking view or something where you could just, get a link or reference from those notes, like a description, click it somewhere else, get a link of that added here. So when you click on that, it actually goes there.
Yeah.
See the description of that.
And so I think another part of what John is talking about, John also mentioned Dagster. I haven't played with Dagster too much, but apparently that's what Dagster does. I guess another thing John was talking about was if our description gets really, really big, like if we have a lot of stuff, this is terrible, then you don't want to see all of this at once, especially if you don't really care about this, you care about the overall flow, or you're focusing on a specific state or an event. Just the idea of collapsing and expanding these nodes. This is something that the original Viz had in a way, but it's a little bit clunky. It's this basically. And so we could do the same thing with the editor. It's something that we talked about and it's been a frequent request as well.
It's a little more tricky here because the layouting is manual. So it's like when you expand this, you have to make sure that the layout is also being recorrected.
Right. Yeah. And
Like
I have
when you get to views such as printing the diagram into paper or something, these get a lot more critical.
Yeah, I have some ideas for that too, where for example, our state charts already do that. So if I add a self transition over here and I move this, then this self transition moves with it. So we could have similar behavior where, for example, you see how these two actions are above this state? We could have constraints where, for example, if I move the state all the way up here, then the actions might follow it, or might be just a set distance from it, and basically get smart about the position of things when you start adding, deleting, removing, and resizing things in the state chart. So
yeah.
we have a lot of ideas around that. Manual layout does, make it difficult, but I don't think it's an insurmountable problem.
All right, let's get back to track and the what was the next step?
Yeah, so actually, I think that we're, pretty much good. Randy asked, could collapse and expand action be a substate of idle? So yeah, I guess since this is representing a single form, we could very well, oops, I did the zoom out thing again. There we go. We could very well have like an expanded, collapse state. And so you could model that if you want. Instead of, well, actually, yeah, these would just move over here. So expand action would go here. Yeah. We would have to do a lot of moving around, but yeah. Oops, I got this in the wrong order. Thankfully, it's easy. We could just switch the source and target right over here, and we're done. I want to say I did that on purpose, but I really didn't. And then we could just move collapse action over here. So, okay. Yeah, so that's a really good idea. Just having expanded and collapsed as substates of idle.
But then again, it's a matter of how much you want your view logic to leak into your abstract logic.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You might want it as something separate, as something that's view only. You don't have to. So yeah, I agree with Farzad. You don't have to express absolutely everything in the state chart. We might just want the business logic over here. But since
exactly. Like imagine you might want to reuse this logic in a completely different view, say on mobile and desktop. Right. You have different ways of representing this.
Yeah, then expanded and collapse doesn't matter. So
yeah,
in some places. There was a question over here. Unexpected feature request. Cut and paste, copy and paste a selection into another state, action. So we're editing actions. Yeah, so I guess, so this is a feature request for the editor itself.
Oh, is it?
Okay. I think so. So let's say that I have these two expanded collapse things and I paste them into here. That works already.
Yeah, our copy paste is not singular, so.
Yeah. In fact, I could take all of these and move them all in here. The layout's
I think Angela was talking about copying and pasting multiple actions in this form.
Oh, yeah. That's a really good feature request. Please go to statelyai.canny.io and add that as a feature request. I have the banner somewhere over here.
Honestly, we would have to bake in more events, such as selecting all of them, selecting the range of them, and anything. Basically, any sort of selectable list has those. So,
yeah, I think it's a really good idea. You should be able to move actions and other things around the state chart freely. So,
besides, you should be able to apply bulk operations, such as deleting more than one action. So, if you select, you can also delete them at once. That would be good. Or even like a clear action or something that would completely wipe out the actions list.
Yeah, all these are really good ideas. And this is, again, an example of how the complexity, the essential complexity can, just build up. And you're going to be really glad that you have a diagram for this instead of just, some loose notes in Jira or something or Notion trying to describe the feature. Now you have a really accurate representation of all the events that could happen, all the actions that could happen, and all the states that, a feature can be in. And in this case, you see we have 3.
So when you have the diagram that powers both of the documentations and the runtime of your code, then you don't have to, babysit the documentation along with code changes. Maintenance is down into one diagram.
Programbo asks, are you going to play auto layout roulette?
Roulette, that's nice.
Why not? Let's see what happens.
It's not a roulette. It's like deterministic, as in you get always one layout if you don't make any changes.
Yeah. Okay. So you know what? That wasn't that bad. I am working on a better, or I guess a more state chart specific auto layout algorithm that makes things a little bit less messy. But this did not do a bad job. I'm actually surprised. Yeah,
it's okay. I'm just a little annoyed about the overlapping lines on labels, but that can be easily tweaked.
Yes, and we do have some updates where we're going to get a lot smarter about that and make them aware of choosing lines that minimize intersections as much as possible. So trust me, we're aware of that, and we will work on that. Okay, let's see what else. Angelo says +1 for locking arrows and lines.
I think it refers to the lines and arrows of the path that we have, the SVG path in the editor for events.
I'm not
sure.
You
were talking about, yeah, I'm not sure anymore.
It's all right. John says the smart positioning would be grouping. Download Figma and play around with it. I have played around with Figma. Select the group states so they maintain their relative positions. Yes, these are all things that we have been thinking about. I would also love to just select a subset of things like states and events and just right click and do auto layouts and be able to only partially auto layout part of that, or even just have alignments, whether it's vertical, horizontal, or a mix of both. Yeah. So grouping, that being part of the constraints auto layout algorithm, that's something that I've been thinking about too. So there's just an infinite number of things that we could do here to
but for what it's worth, in the way that we model the nodes and events here in this graph, we have a notion of family groups, like a family rectangles.
Yeah. So overall, this looks pretty good. Let's simulate it and just make sure that we have the correct logic. So in idle, we could go back and forth between having it be expanded or collapsed. We could add an action. And so now we're in the selecting action state. We could cancel. That's wrong.
Yeah, cancel should get back to idle.
Exactly. So we could just move that there. Okay, so we were here. Cancel takes us back. Add action. We could select an action, which takes us to editing an action. We could, just make a few edits over here. We could cancel doing this, so it takes us back to idle.
I see a bug in our logic.
Yeah, what's up?
So when you immediately enter editing action from selecting action, your property values are empty, so you shouldn't be able to commit that action immediately.
Oh, okay. So that's a good point. Commit an action. This should only happen. I'm going to add a guard. We should only do this if it's action is valid.
Yeah. And then depending on the type of the action, you might want to have different logic there. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So whatever valid means for our specific action, we only want to do this if action is valid. By the way, this looks weird. We are completely redesigning this. In fact, we just merged the major PR that redesigns how guarded transitions look. But yeah, that's how it looks right now. So yeah, really, really good catch. I see another problem in our logic, and this is really only something that you would notice if you've been playing with state charts for a while. And so if you collapse, edit, collapse, expand, let's say let's say I collapse the action because it's really big. I don't care to see all of the different parts of it. And now I want to edit the action. So I make a few edits, etc. And then I commit the action. It's expanded.
You should get back to the history. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, wait, no, I didn't want it expanded. I wanted it to remember whether it was expanded or collapsed. So we could just, I'm going to double click here. I'm just going to add a history state, and we're going to make this type history. And that way it should remember. So we could go here.
Yeah.
And now when we
That'll
simulate,
do.
collapse, edit, commit it if it's valid, and now it goes back to collapsed. So we're good.
This is awesome.
Yeah. All right. So let's see. Angelo said, sorry, I meant regarding how you were thinking about moving those transitions that you had above a state when the state is moved. Move these elements when I move this other one. So yeah, okay. So he was talking about the idea that, let's say that we have these events up here and I move this over here. I'm not saying like just having it be like moving with the state necessarily, even though that might very well be the auto layout behavior. Let's say I have another state here and I have an event that just goes to the state from up here. I wouldn't want this event to collide. Yeah, to collide with this state like that, because then that gets really buggy.
Push it back while you're moving the other one.
Yeah, I want it to be smart about like it maybe going here, and just trying to find a really good place so that, or if we have an edge case where it's here, maybe it should push the event over here. And basically just get really smart without having weird artifacts like you see over here. All things that we're thinking about.
Yeah, not very easy problem to solve.
Programmer asks, is the layout selection feature on Canny? I'll vote for it right now. I don't believe it is. So please
What does
add
layout
the feature
selection mean?
I think layout selection is referring to whether you want things vertically laid out, horizontally, etc.
Right. Yeah, I haven't seen that on Canny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but all right, now we have our action and our action editor logic, and we could see just all of the different things we could do. We could edit an action property, commit it if it's valid, collapse, expand it. We could delete the action, reorder, duplicate it. There's a whole bunch of things we could do. And because this is in a state chart, and we don't really have this yet, but you could generate all of the different use cases from this diagram alone, which is pretty great. So we could say, given the users in idle, when they add an action, they should be in selecting action. Given the users in selecting action, when they cancel creating that action, they should go back to idle. Now, this would be a pretty long list to type out, but automatically generating it from here is much easier. So that's coming soon. Or soon, probably next year.
At some point.
At some point. This is coming at some point. Yeah, is there anything else you want to add here? All right. Well, I think that's good. We have the logic, and this is actually something that Farzad and I are going to be working on as part of the redesign. So
thank you for helping us design a feature.
Yeah. Thank you all. So I'm really glad that we have a diagram. We could use this as a visual specification to work from. And yeah, it's going to look great. So.
Oh, okay. So yeah. John was talking about partial auto layout. By layout selection, he meant partial auto layout.
Oh, only apply auto layout on currently selected items. Yes. So if you go to Canny, type auto layout. We have auto layout within parent states. I guess this would be that.
Wow.
In fact, that is you. I would like to perform an auto layout on the state to tie it up its child states. So yes, that would be basically, this would be a subset of that feature. So you could say all of the states within this state, I want auto layout, or I want like these two states to be auto layouts relative to the existing layouts. So
yeah. I mean, once we got the partial auto layout logic in place, you could do the auto layout based on different criteria. So most of those tickets will be closed automatically.
Yeah. I love how this got meta. We were talking about a future feature for the editor, and we ended up talking about more future features for the editor. And really soon we're going to have a project view. And like, since we were talking about auto layouts, in the future, we're going to be able to just say, add a new machine. Let's talk about auto layout. We could switch back and forth between our action editor and the auto layout machine and just talk about different features in those two. And then eventually we'll have Farzad's drag and drop image mode, so we could just put screenshots.
No. I don't want drag and drop image. I want pasting images because that's my workflow.
Pasting. Okay, so
yeah,
you would
just basically take a screenshot, set the destination of the screenshot. Like when you use the screenshot tool in Mac, you can set the destination to clipboard, so it automatically copies for you, and you can paste it anywhere.
Oh yeah, actually that'd be great.
Yeah. Actually, it's not hard. I might as well just do it. So,
yeah.
Wait for it this office hours on Friday.
All right. But awesome. Thank you all so much for joining our stream and helping us out in basically designing an upcoming editor feature.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you very much. And I love that we get inspired for potential future plans whenever we just work on, anything using our own product. Dogfooding is the best.
Exactly. All right. Well,
all right.
Talk to you all later.
Have a good one, everyone.